Scott was introduced to me by my aunt. He was working as a jailer up in Anderson County, and we were set up on a blind date, and 6 months to the date later, we were married. We were head over heels in love with each other and wanted to spend the rest of our lives with each other.
Scott Claborn was like a son to me. He was been in law enforcement some 14, 15 years when he was killed. We fished together, we did some hunting together. We were as good of friends as I had. Like I say, he was like a son to me, and it was a terrible loss.
He was such a laid-back person and didn't put on airs. He didn't think he was better than anyone else. He was your everyday, average, upstanding man that would help you out. If you needed a shirt, he'd give you the one off his back. That was the way he was.
He liked helping people. If he thought somebody was in trouble, he liked to reach out and help them. That was just the kind of person he was. With Scott being my only child, I had lots of concerns when he wanted to become a police officer. But I'd never really tried to talk him out of it because that was something that he wanted to do. And, you know, for years he had talked about being an officer. And I thought, well, everybody's got to have a career. I know it's a dangerous career to have, but I didn't try to talk him out of it. I knew there was danger there, that if he got in that line of duty.
Scott was an honest, dedicated lawman, and I come from a family of lawmen, so I judge them. I'm a pretty tough judge, I think, on law enforcement officers, and he was one of the best I knew. You knew he was going to treat you like you should be treated when he had interaction with you. He was not going to lie. He was not going to mistreat you in any form or fashion. He was a perfect gentleman, and that's what I really liked about him as a police officer.
I knew he was a good man and a wonderful husband, and I could see potential, but when we had that baby, oh my God, he was the most amazing father I've ever seen, and I was very, very blessed to have him in my life for the short amount of time that I did.
From the time I was 5, started school and everything, on his days off, Thursday and Fridays, or Fridays and Saturdays, he always made it a point to take me to the donut shop. We'd get kolaches and donut holes for breakfast before he'd take me to school. It was our little special bonding thing we did. We loved to go out in the yard, play football, play catch. I'd help him do yard work, just anything to spend time with him. We were always close, really close together. Go out to the shooting range. Being in a law enforcement family, we had lots of guns. Have a blast, load up, and go spend a day out. Come back, clean guns together, sitting on his bed, just talking, giggling, playing around. Always there for me.
Every day when I got off, Scott would call me at 4:30 on my way home and tell me to be careful, and he loved me. I told him I loved him, and he wanted to talk to Tanner, and the last words I heard Tanner say to his daddy were, "I love you too, Daddy." That was one thing Tanner asked me for a long time afterwards. I remember to tell Daddy I loved him. I said, yes, every single time. You always told your daddy you loved him. On the phone, if you're going to Nana's house, whatever.
The weekend before my dad was killed, I was in Texas Children's Hospital with complications from type 1 diabetes and an infection from a insulin site from my insulin pump that almost caused me to die. I was in a coma over a weekend and came home and still had tests that week. So I'd literally go to school for an hour, hour and a half, take my test, come straight home, go to bed, and sleep the rest of the day till the very next morning, get up, go to school, take my test, come home, go back to sleep. Did that 3 days in a row, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and that Thursday morning is when we found out he had been killed.
I had a very hard time going to sleep that night. It was like I had this sensibility, I guess, about myself that when things are about to happen, it's like I get this intuition that something's happening.
That night, I knew that he was going to work an extra job, which all police officers do. I can't think of anybody that doesn't work extra jobs that's a police officer.
About 4 o'clock that morning, I don't have nothing but a cell phone, and I keep it on the bed with me. And my phone rang. I'd say 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm not really sure exactly what time, somewhere around 4. My phone rang. And I guess I had just barely dozed off, was dozing off to go to sleep. I was just right in that crisis of when you go into that first deep sleep. And so I opened up my phone, and I didn't think that I recognized the voice on the other end of the line, so I hung up the phone. And as soon as I hung up the phone started ringing again. I answered the phone again, and it was Paula's mother. And she called me to tell me that I needed to get up and get dressed because I needed to go to the hospital.
We went to bed that night, and Tanner had a special request. He asked if he could sleep in our bed with me because Scott was going to be gone all night.
I'd been sleeping in my parents' room because of the medical complications. He had been at work that night, so I slept on his side of the bed.
The next thing I know, sometime in the morning, early hours, I got a phone call telling me that there was an officer on the way over to pick me up to take me to where Scott was. He'd been in an accident, and he was going into surgery.
We were awakened with a phone call that Scott had been in a bad accident and that we needed to get to the hospital as quick as we could. We left my house, drove to Scott and Paula's house, and picked up Paula in a patrol car, picked us up. Don't remember the deputy's name. I think it was Blackledge that gave us a ride, and all he could tell us was that it was a bad accident and Scott had been hurt really bad.
So of course I lose it, but start getting ready because you have to. We're trying to be quiet and keep Tanner asleep. He woke up and saw my face and asked me what was wrong. I said, nothing, I just have to go somewhere. I was so, it's a hard description when you know that your spouse is injured and you're trying to get there and they're in the medical center and you live, an hour from there. That was a long ride down there to me because they kept lowering the volume on the microphone or the police scanner so that I couldn't hear it because they didn't want me to hear the update that he was gone before they knew or before anyone had told me. I had to show him how to get to the hospital because it was the same hospital that Tanner had gotten out of 2 days prior. He had almost died over the weekend. He had been in Texas Children's and had almost died. And then 2 days after he gets home, we're back in the medical center and Scott dies. But when I got there, I jumped out of the car and I ran for the back where the ambulance bay is, through all the officers.
I would not allow myself to accept the fact that he was going to be dead. I would not accept that until I got there. And of course, Paula was with us. Later, my other daughter, Angie, came in.
When we got to the hospital, she parked the vehicle and she took off running toward the building. Well, I didn't know where I was going, and so I began to run after her to try to keep up. Like I say, I had a lot of foot problems back in those days. So I went running, and as she was going through the door, I heard her say, "Constable Hill," is what she said. And I thought, well, why is she saying Constable Hill? Well, I go through the door. When I get through the door, they close the door, and it's this small little room. Not very big at all. And Angie went across the room to sit down, and I recall there was another gentleman sitting in the room. And David Hill, Paula's dad, came up to me and kind of put his arm around me. And he said, "Betty," he said, "I wish that I didn't have to be the one to tell you." But he said, "Scott didn't make it." Well, my knees were knocking. The son that I brought up was gone. He wasn't with me no more.
When the doctor came back into the room and talked to us, she kept talking and talking about his heart had stopped in the ambulance. And they got it restarted, so I was getting excited. And then, she said, stopped again. So they cracked his chest and did an internal massage and paddles. But he hadn't made it. And for a split second, I didn't even think, oh my God, I'm a 35-year-old widow with a child to raise. That's not what I just started screaming. Oh my God, what am I gonna tell Tanner? And I was screaming it over and over and over again. What am I gonna tell Tanner?
I was crying real bad. And after I sat there for a little bit, he wanted to know, did I want to go see Scott? He said Scott was right down the hallway. And I told him, yes, I wanted to go see Scott. So he walked down the hallway with me, holding on to me. I couldn't even hardly walk. And he takes me into this room, and Scott's laying on the stretcher thing. I knew that he had been gone for some time, because when I touched him, he was cold as ice.
He just looked like he was taking a nap under the sheet. And when I touched him, he was so cold, I couldn't believe he was gone.
I saw pain and felt pain like I'd never felt. It was like losing a son, and then not only losing a son, but seeing my two girls suffer. There's just horrendous pain of knowing that Scott was never going to make it back home, to be a father to Tanner, to be a fishing bud for me. It was pretty stoic. I don't try not to display my emotions too much, but it hit hard. hit very hard that night, and especially hard on my children.
I just knew I had to get out of there soon to go see Tanner because he would be waking up, and I did not want anyone else to tell him, or I did not want him to find out and overhear from somebody talking and learn that his dad was dead or hear it on the TV. So I got another officer to drive me back home. And my dad stayed up there to wait with Betty to tell her.
I didn't see Paula. They had taken Paula to the hospital earlier. So we never met pass. We never made a pass with one another. She was on her way home, I guess, as I was there. It was the most terrible thing in my life. I would never want anybody to experience this in their life. Never.
And losing a spouse, especially Scott, I lost the best person in the world to me. He was Tanner's whole world. And I knew that if I did not break this news to him in the best possible way, that he was going to be scarred way beyond what this was going to scar him for. And so I said, I want to tell him by myself, and we will sit and cry as long as it takes. And that's exactly what we did, is I walked back there and shut my bedroom door. And it's I remember this as if it was yesterday. I walked up on the side of the bed where he was sleeping, and I just looked at him. He was so innocent. Oh my God. Children are so innocent. And I was going to have to break his heart, wake him up and tell him his daddy had been killed and would never come home. Come home again. So I watched him for a few moments. I just couldn't. I wanted to keep putting it off and putting it off, but I know that there were more and more people coming, and I needed to comfort him so bad. So I finally shook his little arm and I said, Tanner, honey, wake up for Mama. And he opened his eyes and looked at me. He knew something was wrong.
Vividly remember my mom coming in and shaking me awake, and I could already tell something was wrong. She was bawling her eyes out. I could tell she had been for a while. She just looked at me and said, Tanner, your dad was in a car wreck and he's not coming home. And at that moment it felt like someone ripped my heart in two. It was physical pain, just knowing he wasn't going to come back through that door ever again. We sat there and cried for a good hour and a half, just sitting in her room and just talking about how we're going to make it, how we're going to survive without him. It just says a physical pain. It felt like someone stabbed me right in the chest. And it was definitely the hardest thing I've ever had to hear in my entire life.
I told him, I said, the next few days, I said, maybe for a while, I said, people are going to tell you, you've got to be the man of the house, you got to take care of me and all this stuff, but I want you to know, without a doubt, right now, I am your mother, and I will take care of you.
In the beginning, there was a great deal of support from Precinct 4 Constable's office. There's some of the finest folks in the world work Precinct 4.
Scott had lots of good co-workers, people that loved him dearly. And when Scott got killed, they really pitched in and helped.
It felt really, really good to have Scott's coworkers around us because as bad as I knew that they felt because they were grieving, they were also grieving for us. So I think that it helped us both, but they also put themselves in my shoes, which any officer's family will do. What would happen if I were killed in the line of duty? What would happen to my family? Would somebody be there for my family? And without a doubt, police officers are there for each other. You know, when they lose one of their own, it is like literally a member of their family has been killed.
It's a family. Having all the brothers in blue behind our back, it's a great feeling knowing that there is support there if we ever need it.
Like I say, I expected to be just my family, my family, Paula and Tanner, remembered and honored and elevated by Precinct 4, and they did several different things that I was really happy with. My Tanner got an opportunity to meet Lyle Lovett there at the constable's office, and that impressed me. That I thought was extending the family touch.
They did everything. They brought food. They couldn't have been any better. But as far as Scott's boss, there was no interaction whatsoever. By the way, the morning that Scott got killed, when Mr. Hill told me that Scott had passed away, that Scott did not make it, the first thing he asked me was, did I know Scott's boss? The other gentleman in the room was Ron Hickman. And he asked me, did I know Scott's boss? And I said, no, I have never met him. So Mr. Hickman got up. At that time, let me restate my statement. When I walked in, when he introduced me to Ron Hickman, I did not know at that time that my son had passed away right at the beginning. When I walked in, Mr. Hill said, have you ever met Scott's boss? And I said, no, I haven't. And he said, I want to introduce you to Ron Hickman. This is Scott's boss. And Ron Hickman came up to me and kind of put his arms around me just briefly, just very briefly. And I put my arms around his shoulders. And as he was embracing me, I just kind of whispered to him, and I said, how bad is it? I asked him. And at that point, he kind of let loose of me and kind of backed away from me. He never answered me, didn't say nothing. And as he kind of backed away from me, Mr. Hill, that was when Mr. Hill came and put his arm around my shoulder, and that's when he told me that Scott did not make it. And and I was devastated. Ron Hickman never said he was sorry. He never said nothing to me. He kind of backed away. When I came back, I don't recall seeing him in the room anymore.
As far back as I can remember, I never remembered having any of the upper brass, any captains, lieutenants, the constable himself. No one ever came out to the house. I remember seeing them they did the badge retirement ceremony. I remember seeing Constable Hickman. But other than that, I don't really recall seeing him ever. He wasn't out coming to visit. He wasn't giving us phone calls to check on us. He wasn't trying to be a part of it, anything. He, almost like he ignored us. He didn't really want to talk to us. It seemed like when we did see him, he'd shake our hand and be busy again, walk off and be doing something else. Wouldn't get more than 3 or 4 words out of him. So it just, looking back on it, I realize all this now. At the time, there was so much more going on that we didn't really pay attention to it.
I at the time considered my family a longtime friend of Hickmans. I didn't know any different.
I remember at the hospital, even that night, Ron Hickman assured me, even though he knew the young man that had killed my son, that he would treat him just like anybody else would be treated, and that he would be supportive of me and my family without any thought of friendship with that family. He wasn't truthful. The rest of the folks down there, a lot of them, even till today, I've got friends at Precinct 4. I could pick up the phone call right now and they'd be here within 15 minutes. There's some awfully good people, some awfully good officers in Precinct 4. I was disappointed, thoroughly disappointed in the performance of Ron Hickman.
You would expect his own boss, the constable, to come at least out to the victim's house, talk to us, visit with us, tell us what's happening, keep us updated, ask if there's anything we need, just be there. You would expect someone in that position to be there for the family of one of his deputies killed. Anything we needed, he should have been there, and I don't remember, like I said before, I don't remember ever hearing from him, ever seeing him outside of his own office or a political event. Never personally came to us and said, hey, do you need anything? Do you need this or that? Or talk to us personally about anything.
It's like a stab in the back. That's what it feels like to us, to get stabbed in the back by somebody that you think that you could trust. I thought all lives mattered. Evidently, my son's life didn't matter at all.
This rhetoric has gotten out of control. We've heard Black lives matter, all lives matter. Well, cops' lives matter too. So why don't we just drop the qualifier and just say lives matter and take that to the bank?
How do you tell a 9-year-old boy that someone's murdered his father? And not only that, he doesn't really care that he's murdered your father, because on the police report, he said apparently he didn't have enough to drink because he was still hurting.
It's wrong to go to bat for a person who testified under oath that he was blind drunk and running over 100 miles an hour when he killed my son-in-law. It's just wrong.
That's not a nice person. My husband, on the other hand, the hero that he is, was trying to climb out the side of his car, the passenger side that wasn't damaged. What he didn't realize was how bad he was damaged. He had broken back. All his ribs were broken. He was in bad shape, and he wasn't, there was no way.
My son was everything to me. My family is everything to me. Tanner and Paula, they are my family. They will always be my family.
We were sitting there in that room before, gosh, it was even before the doctor came in. That's how I remember it. And there were a room full of people in there with us. And Ron Hickman stood up and told me that he knew the person that hit Scott, but that would not affect his job at all, that this investigation would be handled exactly how it should be.
Ron Hickman was there for the killer's family, but wasn't there for us, obviously.
I started hearing rumors that Ron Hickman had written to the parole board. And I heard it from a lot of people in that department. And these were getting to be very, very strong rumors. I had yet to see the letter, so I had notified my attorney of it. And he had to subpoena Ron Hickman for that letter. And then he claims that he ran it past me. That's late. The latest developments are that he had my blessing to do it, which is a lie.
Later on, when we began to hear that Ron Hickman had written a letter to the parole board assuring them that he and his department could watch after this young man that had killed Scott, and appealing for them to let him out early, and that he would guarantee that he and his department would take care of watching over him and making sure that he didn't mess up again.
Promised to keep a good eye on him when he got out, because he lived right around the corner from him, and he's good friends of the family, good Christian boy, and would never do anything wrong. He'd keep an eye on him. He should be released early. And it just, like I said, it was a stab in the back.
I find that highly offensive. You're asking your officers to babysit their friend's killer.
I assured my daughter on numerous occasions, I said, Paula, not any way under the sun Ron Hickman would write a letter to the parole board to get a man out of jail that had killed one of his officers and my son-in-law. I says, nothing, he would not do that. And I must have told Paula that probably a dozen times when I assured her he was a man of integrity, and he wasn't.
I had no clue that Ron Hickman would side with the person that killed my husband at all. Had absolutely no idea. If I had, I probably would have stood up to him right then and called him on it, shamed him for what he was doing, because it was wrong. It's just wrong. You don't do that.
He wrote a letter, it just when I saw it, it was like cutting me. It couldn't have been a bit more painful. And as a result, whether or not that letter influenced the parole board or not, that man spent 17 months and 5 days for killing Scott Claborn. And I don't know of any way that 17 months and 5 days is appropriate punishment for a person to take a young law officer's life like that. Just not any way.
I believe Ron Hickman's sole motivation for taking the killer's side over my father's was politically based. Lee Fincher Jr., the man who killed my father's aunt, is Patricia Harless, who is a state representative, and Ron Hickman is her campaign treasurer. They're both huge campaign contributors to each other's campaign, and I believe it was more of a political favor than anything else. I believe someone in his family might have contacted Constable, and Fincher's family might have contacted Constable Hickman and requested that he write the letter. Even when he was confronted about it, he said no one on either side from either family had asked him to write the letter. He did it on his own accord. But I just find it extremely hard to believe that someone on his own accord could write a letter to the parole board asking that a killer of one of his own deputies be released.
It is flat out betrayal by someone you should not be betrayed by. He is currently sitting as sheriff, appointed by a commissioner's court that my son spoke to and begged not to put on as sheriff because of what he did to us. And they went ahead and put him on there. And I hold them equally responsible for promoting somebody, because that's basically what they did. They promoted him to the head of an agency that is made up of police officers, and he won't even back one of his own.
Why would anyone think that is okay, especially someone in a position of power, an elected official whose one of his sole responsibilities is to be impartial to family matters, to friends, to everything, and do his job, uphold the law the way it was written, the way he was supposed to. Not do political favors and backdoor dealings and favors for people.
I don't think that if you was working for him, I don't think that that would tell you that you could really count on him. I don't think that he would be there for you. I really think the man, he would pick his friends over you. That is the way I see him. I believe that, I don't know, I don't think Scott had ever done anything to Ron Hickman for Ron Hickman to do that to my son. If he did it to my son, what makes you think that he's not going to do it to everybody else? He's going to do it to other people. For him to walk away knowing that his officer got killed in the line of duty, why would he just walk away from him and not try to help the family? I don't trust him. I'm sorry, I don't trust him.
I'd like to tell Ron Hickman that, to me, he's moralless, doesn't deserve to be in any position of power, and if anything, deserves to be in handcuffs just for the fact that he did not back one of his own deputies. It's a stab in the back to everyone, especially nowadays. He's Sheriff Ron Hickman, and I don't know how any officer working for him could feel safe or protected, because what happens if one of them are killed in the line of duty and the killer just happens to be another one of Ron Hickman's friends? Would he write a letter for them also? Would he try to get them out of jail, out of prison, and pull strings as the sheriff, now that he has even more power over being a constable? I don't trust the man, and I don't think anyone should.
Ron Hickman has been called out on this a lot of times, and every single time from the beginning, if he gets pinned in a corner, his story changes. He testified in court that he was not asked by anyone to write that letter. When he got out, he was interviewed by a TV station, confirmed that he was not asked by anyone to write that letter. He just did it because he knew the name, knew the family, they were good Christian people. He was asked, well, then why write one at all? Why write a letter to get your officer's killer out early? He just didn't see what was wrong with that.
When we found out that he wrote the letter trying to get the guy out of prison, how bad does it get?
In the trial, in the civil trial, when Lee Fincher Jr. was called to the stand, he was asked by one of the jurors if he had drank since leaving prison, and he said yes. It's a violation of his parole. You cannot trust Ron Hickman's integrity.
For him to use his office and use his people to say that they would help monitor this young man if he was returned to the streets early is an abuse of power. I don't think there's anyone that I've ever told this to, and I've told it to everyone that has ever asked me what I think of Ron Hickman. And if Ron Hickman were sitting right here, I'd be saying the same words. The man is not ethical, he is not truthful, and he's not a man.
I have a favorite necklace that Scott got me for Valentine's Day, which was 5 days before he was killed.
This is the last piece of him that I've got. And Ron Hickman can't take that away from me. That's about the only way I can say it. This is something that Scott cherished. He cherished his badge that he wore to work every day. And when they wanted to make me a necklace, I was never in my life so honored to have a necklace with the star from his badge. And it says, "Beloved son," on the back of it. I cherish it.
There's anything I could tell my dad right now. I wish I could tell how much I miss him and how much I wish he was here to be with me and help me through life in general and just be here. But wish I could tell him I love him. Wish I could tell him I'd do anything to see him again, even if it's for another minute. Just tell him goodbye one more time.
I don't know that I have spoken. If I have, I've forgotten it, directly to Donald Lee Fincher Jr. If I have spoken to him, I do not remember it. His mother contacted me during the trial of the wrongful death suit and asked me if I could forgive her son. And I do. I have. Not because he deserves it, but that's what a Christian is supposed to do. I used to not be able to tell the story of losing Scott without tearing up, as I am now. But I've gotten past that. I don't hate Fincher. I hate what he did. I don't hate Ron Hickman. I'm disappointed, very, very disappointed. That man represented the state of Texas as president of the JP Constable Association. He represented the nation as the national president of the Constable Association. And he really did not show who he was. He showed who he wanted to be seen as. And I see that as being a total lie and a total letdown to everybody that's ever worn a badge or ever lost anyone in the line of duty.
Tonight, Local 2 investigates the death of a deputy constable and the punishment for the drunk driver who killed him. The family of the officer is furious, saying that Constable Ron Hickman betrayed them by supporting parole for the drunk driver who served less than 3 of his 4-year prison sentence. And they say it's because of a personal connection. KPRC Local 2 investigative reporter Robert Arnold shows us why some say the constable is giving special treatment.
4 years ago, Precinct 4 Deputy Constable Scott Claborn was killed by a drunk driver, Donald Fincher. Claiborne's widow, Paula Henderson, says she was devastated when she learned Precinct 4 Constable Ron Hickman wrote this letter to the parole board supporting the release of the man who killed her husband.
I see this as outright betrayal. I just don't see how you can explain this.
Part of Hickman's letter to the parole board reads, "As a normal course for an incident that killed an officer, I would usually oppose an early release. But in this case, I know enough about the situation to be unable to do that."
You've never written a letter like this before on behalf of anyone. So why this specific letter for this specific drunk driver?
Just because of the unique circumstances. I've known this boy's family. I've known him.
Hickman is a longtime friend of the Fincher family. He also serves on the advisory board of the Pearl Fincher Museum for Fine Arts. Fincher's aunt is State Representative Patricia Harless. Hickman has served as her campaign finance treasurer.
So did I do anything to infer that he should be given any special treatment? No.
Why get involved at all?
Well, obviously, being in the situation, it seemed like the thing to do because I knew both parties.
Hickman says no one from the Fincher family asked him to write that letter. He says the decision was his alone because he believes Fincher is a good man who made a tragic mistake and has since changed.
You understand how some officers maybe would feel betrayed by that? I mean, this is a man who killed one of your own deputy constables, and here you are supporting the man.
Actually, all I supported was that he be released at the time he was normally to be released.
Warren DeProm prosecuted Fincher. He says when he called Hickman to explain what prison sentence they were considering in exchange for a guilty plea,
he thought that the appropriate sentence would be a probation. I was somewhat startled by that.
I cannot think that that happened.
Henderson also sued Fincher in civil court.
The argument that the defendants were making was that there should be no punishment because he had been punished enough. Our position was the punishment was not severe enough.
Today, the jury in the civil trial agreed with that statement and awarded Claiborne's family more than $5.1 million. We also spoke again with Constable Hickman. He says he does not remember ever suggesting that Fincher be given probation, but added had the prosecution offered that as a sentence, he would not have opposed it. Robert Arnold, KPRC Local 2.
Now, Robert also spoke with State Representative Harless. She says she never discussed her nephew's case with Hickman and had no idea the constable wrote a letter to the parole board until after the fact.